Daniel 9:24 through 27. Prophecy of the Messiah explained. There is a strange calculation concerning the 70 weeks of Daniel's prophecy that has caused tremendous confusion. This false method of pinpointing dates has to do with an incorrect starting date, with lunar and solar calendar finagling, an actual misinterpretation of the Bible verse. Daniel 9:24. 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. On your own, you should meditate on these 6 clauses of Daniel 9:24. You may also conclude that these describe exactly what Jesus did at his first coming and to be testified to at his return. This is generally understood and accepted. For example, in the last point of Daniel 9:24, and to anoint the most holy place, consider that Jesus fulfilled this completely. Hebrews 9:24 through 26. For Christ has not entered the holy place made with hands, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us, to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. Daniel 9:25. So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. An important conjunction in the Daniel 9:25 verse is the word until, meaning there that the Messiah will come after the completion of the 69 weeks. The Hebrew word weeks actually means a period of 7, and rightly understood as 7 years. See Genesis 29, verse 27. The issuing of a decree phrase in Daniel 9:25 is about the rebuilding of the city of Jerusalem, not the temple. The point is that the decree here fits well with King Artaxerxes' words in Nehemiah 2:5 through 6 and 2:18 about rebuilding the walls, both words also being the same Hebrew word. Plus, the Hebrew for moat in Daniel 9:25 and wall in Nehemiah 2:8 are both translated in the Septuagint by the Greek word for wall. And certainly the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem are described in the book of Nehemiah as happening in very distressing times. Nehemiah's travel to Jerusalem is said to be in the year 445 or 444 BC. However, this date really has more to do with a strange interpretation calculation about Daniel 9:24 through 27, which was made popular in the 19th and 20th centuries. The theory starts okay with the 69 weeks representing 483 years. That's 69 times 7. But here is where it gets crazy, all just to make their interpretation and calculation work out. They are compelled to assume the revelation is according to the Hebrew lunar calendar year. So, to convert to the solar years, you must multiply by 360 days, divided by 365.25 days to come up with the actual years. Add this figure to the 444 or 445 BC decree date, to supposedly pinpoint the very day the Messiah rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. Not a very convincing process, especially if the start date and interpreted end date are wrong. Yet there is a more convincing and concise way to proceed, to lay the groundwork, and to arrive at the correct starting point. Look at what Nehemiah 2:1 states. And it came about in the month Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes. But what is the 20th year of Artaxerxes? Well, consider what the careful Greek historian Thucydides wrote. Themistocles sent a letter to Artaxerxes, the son of Xerxes, who had just succeeded to the throne. The Archbishop James Ussher, after careful research, published in 1654 that Themistocles came into Persia about 473 BC. Therefore, Artaxerxes would have likely become king in 474 BC. Then, the 20th year of King Artaxerxes in Nehemiah 2:1 refers to would be 455 BC. Note, in the 20th, not after. Thereafter, a bishop, William Lloyd, took these chronological dates and put them in the margin of his 1701 Bible. However, Lloyd altered Ussher's date for Artaxerxes' 20th year to be 445 BC, which may have been a mistake of transposition. Nevertheless, performing the simple calculation beginning with the correct date of 455 BC plus 483 years, that's 69 weeks, with only 1 year for 1 BC to 1 AD, the date of 29 AD is arrived at, which is the probable year of Jesus' baptism. 29 BC is the year of Jesus' probable baptism because the generally accepted date for his death and resurrection is 33 AD. That is, about 3.5 years later. Also note, immediately after his baptism, Jesus was known as the King of Israel. See John 1:49. This dual history of both the baptism and passion of the Messiah in Daniel's prophecy is a wonderful concept well worth pursuing. Therefore, consider the possibility that Daniel 9:26-27 is in the form of Hebrew parallelism. Daniel 9:26a. Then after the 62 weeks the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, that is, not for himself. And Daniel 9:27a. And he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. The Greek Septuagint for Daniel 9:27a. And 1 week shall establish the covenant with many, and in the midst of the week my sacrifice and drink offering shall be taken away. This hints that within the last period of 7 years a new covenant will be initiated with many. See Jeremiah 31:31. Consider this interpretation. After the 62 weeks, that is 69 weeks total, or 483 years, the Messiah will come and ratify the new covenant within that last week, the 70th week. But in the middle of that week, that is 3.5 years, the Messiah will be killed, which is 486.5 years after Nehemiah's time. It is clear that after Jesus' baptism, 1. Immediately, his covenant words were filled with the fact that belief and trust brings salvation. See John 5:24 and 6:29. And 2, 3.5 years later, with his death as a ransom for many, see Mark 10:45, he put an end to the symbolic and temporary substitution of the temple sacrifices. These facts match Daniel 9:26a and 27a. Continuing, Daniel 9:26b, and the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and its end will come with a flood. And 9:27b, on the wings of abomination will come one who makes desolate. As far as this fulfillment, both Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, just as predicted in Daniel 9:26b. And also spoken of by Jesus in Luke 21:7 and 21:20-24. Yet it is only the people of a future prince who is to come, which must refer to the final Antichrist figure. Daniel 9:26c, even to the end there will be war, desolations are determined. And 9:27c, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. Decreed here is another Hebrew word which actually means decreed. This portion of Daniel 9:26c and 27c refers to the suspension of the last 3.5 years. For the time is of the end, when a final and complete destruction is meted out upon the one who makes desolate. This suspension is gleaned from the many references to the 42 months, 1,260 days, and the time and a half a time reign of the Antichrist, that false prophet, the one who controls the world through the seven-headed beast system in the book of Revelation. Case in point, Isaiah 61, 1-2, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord and the day of vengeance of our God. But in Luke 4:18-19, Jesus stopped after quoting only to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord, thus allowing for a suspension of the day of vengeance of our God to a future fulfillment. In conclusion, the simple calculation of Daniel 9:24-27, 1. Starting with the correct year of 455 BC, 2. Adding 483 years to arrive at the baptism of Jesus in 29 AD, 3. Understanding that he was killed as a ransom 3.5 years later on Passover in 33 AD, 4. Accepting that the remaining 3.5 years brackets the period of the gospel of grace, and 5. Until the time of the complete destruction of the Antichrist, as detailed in the book of Revelation. All these provide a very satisfying explanation to Daniel's prophecy, with a certain fulfillment beginning with the first coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, and finally completed at the consummation of his second coming.